How you doing? I'm Matt with 731woodworks.com. Today we're building this rolling library cart or rolling bookshelf, whatever you want to call it. So we got 3 shelves. 2 of them are angled at 20 degrees so that the books, when they're on there, they won't fall off there when it's rolling. So it's nice and stable. Got 4 casters on there. 2 of them are locking casters. Got nice handholds. I'll show you how I did all this in the video coming up.
We're building me a bookshelf for my classroom.
Today is July 31st, 2019. 20 years ago today we met. A year later we got married in 2000, so we've been married for 19 years, been together for 20. It's been amazing. For our anniversary, she wants a bookshelf for her classroom that rolls.
A library cart.
A library cart. Bookshelf for a classroom. You could build something like this for your nursery, for your kids' room, for yourself. The list goes on. So we're going to do this for her classroom. We're starting out with 3 1x12s by 8 foot. That's all we're going to need for this project, plus 4 casters we order off Amazon. There'll be a link in the description below to all the supplies we use in this build. Let's get started.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to use a Forstner bit and make some handles that are going to be at the top of the cart. That way, as I move it around my classroom, I can just grab the handle and go. He's going to make it 3 inches long. He's going to put a hole on each side and then connect it with
Jigsaw.
Jigsaw. There you go.
We're going to put the top of the hole about 2 inches from the top of the cart. Just for reference, we're building our cart. This is 44 inches tall, and then we're going to add the casters on the bottom, which will make it about 2 more inches tall. So it should be about 46 inches tall when we're done, give or take a little bit. The first thing I'm going to do is measure down 2 inches. What I've done, I've clamped both boards together. That way I can drill through both at the same time. If you're doing this, make sure you take a scrap piece, put on the back side so that you don't have any tear out when you drill through. Change of plans, we're going to make the hole 4 inches long instead of 3, just to give it a little extra space for a handhold. So all I did was I took the Forstner bit, I lined the edge up with my top line, so it's as tall as I want it to go, or as far close to the top as I want it to go, and lined that with my edge, how far I want to go either way, and just took a hammer or a rubber mallet and just made a mark with the tip of it so that when I drill I won't get off any. And the reason we use a Forstner bit versus a regular hole saw bit like this is these create a lot of tear out. They don't cut very clean. Forstner bit's going to give you a nice clean cut, and they're actually, if you're just buying the one bit, or just, you know, they're pretty inexpensive for the quality of work they did. This is a Freud 1.5" Forstner bit. I'll drop a link below to that. Be sure, I know I said it before, but it's very imperative you put a backing board, and this is just a drop off these 2 boards. So put that backing board on the back when you drill so that it doesn't tear out on you, because if you don't, your bottom board is going to tear out and it's going to be real ugly. So for our shelving pieces, we're going to cut them 46 inches wide at 46 inches wide. So when you add each piece on this either side of it, you're going to add 3/4 on each side, so the total width will be about 47.5 inches wide. Main thing what you want to do is when you're cutting these, I'm going to cut the first one at 46, and I'm going to lay this one on top of the next piece so that I'm ensuring that I get the exact width on every one, so that my box winds up being, or the shelf winds up being nice and square. We'll put everything in. I'm going to cut 3 shelves of the bottom and then 2 shelves. And then for the back side, we're going to use a 1x6, and so that the books don't fall off the back. So on the top, I want to round over these corners. I don't want those to be sharp corners. I want those to be rounded. You can take anything that's round to use as a guide. You can use this is a bench cookie. You can use a cup, Hell steak. Either side of it just depends on how big of a radius you want on the edges of your board. I like how that looks. I was going to do both at the same time, but because this jigsaw walks so much, the blade actually it'll flex on me so much. I'm just going to do one at a time. I think it'll come out better. If you get a little tear out with the blade or a little bit of splintering, don't worry about that. We're going to sand all this down and round this over, I think. For the bottom shelf only, I'm going to use the Craig K5 pocket hole jig. I think this will make a stronger joint for the bottom. For the middle and the top shelf, you'll see that I'm going to drill from the outside of the uprights into the shelf itself. I think though for the bottom, I prefer the Craig jig just to give it a little more strength. This makes a very strong joint, especially on corner or butt joints like that. So I'm just going to drill 4 pocket holes on each end for the bottom, then we'll start putting this thing together. I went ahead and sanded the whole thing on the edges because we want, once we get the shelves in there, it's going to be hard to get to. So I wanted to go ahead and do that. Now we're going to start putting this thing together. I'm going to set the sides up here on my workbench. So the bottom's going to fit square on each end like this. I've got some 5-foot clamps. If you don't have these, you can use a couple of 3-foot clamps and join them together. These are from Harbor Freight. They're pretty cheap clamps, but they work very well. So we use a little wood glue. This is Tight Bond Quick and Thick. Once you got everything nice and tight, we went ahead and put a board up there to keep the top from caving in on us. It's cut the same length as this one, so we know everything's square. I just flushed up this bottom on each side. These boards do tend to have a little bit of cup to them, so if there's a little bit of difference in the middle, I wouldn't worry about that so much. Just make sure your outside edges are flush, and these edges are as flush as you can get them. We got that bottom on. Now we're going to put our 2 shelves in. We're going to angle them so that the books, when they're sitting in there, they are angled toward the back so that they don't fall out. And we'll put a backing on this as well. First thing we got to do is figure out where we want the shelf and at what angle. So what we're going to do, we've figured out or decided it has to be angled. And then because it's going to be angled, if we angle it at whatever degree we decide, and then we put a back piece on, it's going to stick out behind it too much. So we're going to raise this up until we feel like that the shelf is as deep as you want it. We're going to make a mark, which we've done here, and we're going to rip this board down, and then we'll take another piece on the back side, a 3-inch piece or so, and put on the back once this is ripped. 3 inches, we're going to rip a 3-inch piece off of this 1x12. And then we can take that 3-inch piece, or maybe one a little wider, off of our drop, and do the same thing there. So what she's decided to do is we're going to measure from 14 inches down to the top of our first shelf. It's going to be angled back. And then we're going to do 14 inches from the top of that one to the top of the next one, and then whatever space is left over at the bottom. I've got an angle finder. These are pretty inexpensive and they're very, very handy. Once we figure out what angle we want, I can set this into place and use it on the next shelf and on the other side so that we make sure that the angles are the same all the way around. And then I'm going to drill in from the outside and countersink those screw holes and put a dowel in there and cut that off so that we've got a nice looking finish. That's what we're doing. Explain what I did. This is a 20-degree angle. We've decided that's what we want. I've taken this angle finder. This is the bottom of the board. This is the top of the board. This is the center of the board that's inside right there. And so I've center punched those holes where I'm going to drill. That way I don't have any walking. And drill straight. gonna put a screw there and then 2 there. So that's my Craig bit. It's 3/8 of an inch. And I can take my 3/8 of an inch dowel now and drive in there and cut that off flush once everything's sanded. We'll take 2-inch screws. Inch dowel. I got a little wood glue on the end. It's a flush trim saw or a pull saw. So we have one of these left because we had cut 2.5 boards, and with the last half we just ripped this piece straight in half at 5 and 5/8 inches wide. It's actually going to line up after the blade. You take the thickness of your blade out, it's about 5.5 inches is what we ripped it at. And we're going to take this for our backer board. We're actually going to set it behind this board like this on a 90-degree angle, and drill in from the back side. Attach it with say 4 or 5 screws here in the back side. That's going to do 2 things. If you just put a strip up here and don't attach to this one, you lose some structural some structure in your piece. Structural integrity, that's what I'm looking for. In your piece, especially if you're putting textbooks on this, and we want to make it pretty strong. So attaching this just gives it an extra backbone there. And then, like I said, we're just going to put that in there as a 90-degree angle to this one. I'm going to drill a couple of holes out here on the edges, and then maybe 2 in the back here. I think that's what I'm going to do. Put 2 screws here, one here, and then 2 on each end. So this is the back side of my top shelf. We'll go ahead and attach this. I've just got some 18-inch clamps. I'm going to just hold this in place with it. Don't. Well, I still needed that. Thought I could get away with moving that, but apparently not. We'll flip this over. What I did was I ripped this edge here, so I'm going to put that a little more rounded over on the top. Put that cut edge on the back side where the cut edge is on the other board. That way those sharp edges stay away from the books and the kids. So I'm going to round over a lot of this anyway with a 1/4-inch round over bit once we're done. Going to flush that bottom up before I put my clamp on. It doesn't have to be tight. I'm just snugging this up just to keep it flush while I get my screws in there. Let's go with 3 screws. Pretty good expanse there. 11.5 inches from each side and 23 for the middle. So I got that first shelf in. I'm going to go ahead and put the second shelf in. What we're doing is measuring down 14 inches from the top of this shelf to the top of the next shelf. Doing the exact same way, 20 degrees here with a 90-degree back off of this 20 degrees. Those worked out well. I still got to sand that a little bit to get it a little more smooth. Once we stain this, those pieces will kind of pop through. It'll look good, a nice little detail. I've also got a round over this, and I'll take a 1/8 inch round over, 1/8 inch round over bit on the inside of these to make them nice and smooth, and I'll have to hand sand the inside of that handle to make it smooth. And then we got our casters to put on, and then we'll stain it. But we're gonna go ahead and put that second shelf in. Now I'm going to take my rigid trim router with an 1/8 inch round over bit and round over the inside of these holes so that they're nice and smooth. All we have left to do now is sand it. We're going to use 120 grit sandpaper to sand it down. 120 grit all over. I hate sanding. Are you going to sand?
I'll sand.
She's probably not going to sand. I'm going to have to sand. And then we're going to take a little bit on the inside of those handles. We'll just hand sand that to get that smooth. We're going to sand this over. Instead of rounding over, we're using a round over bit because it won't match the rest of it. We're just going to take a sander and smooth everything out. And then we'll put our casters on. So we get these casters on Amazon. If you saw my tool cart build, I use the same one on those, and I also use these on my wife's podium that she uses. They're very good casters. They roll very easy. They hold quite a bit of weight, and they just move easy with weight on them. So we went back with these.
And they're lockable.
And they're lockable. There's 2 of them that come with these locks and 2 that do not. So out of the 4, 2 of them lock, keeps everything from moving. What's good about them is they're only like $16 or so for the set of 4. So we're going to go ahead and put these on. If you're interested in these, I'll link in the description to them. And we'll put them 1.5 inches from the end so that we're not drilling into the end grain of our board. And then I'm using 3/4 inch screws. They do not come with your own hardware, so you need to pick up some 3/4 inch screws. And I'm just going to flush them up to the front and to the back, and then 1.5 inches in from the edge. We got everything on. What it is, I just went ahead and pre-drilled those holes for those casters so I can go ahead and put my pre-stain conditioner on there, my stain. We always use that pre-stain conditioner. If you don't, when you put your stain on, it'll come out blotchy, especially on this spruce. So I highly recommend that. It just makes everything look nicer. When I put it on, I give it about 20-30 minutes to dry, and then we'll put our stain on. We let the pre-stain conditioner dry for about 30 minutes. Now it's time to put our stain on. We're going with Golden Oak, a Minwax Golden Oak, because everything in our classroom that we built so far has been a Golden Oak. So that's what we're going with on this, so that everything matches. Also, we wanted to go with a stain versus a paint because kids putting books on and off, we didn't want it to get scratched up. The paint would actually probably wind up scuffing and things like that. I think the stain will actually hold up longer. So that's what we're going to do. First thing I'm going to do is stain the bottom, put the casters on, and then I'm going to set it down on the floor so I can roll it around and stain the rest. I'm going to put the locking casters up front so that when she's rolling around she can lock it in place. Let's put that stain on. So we let the stain dry overnight. I usually let that stain dry at least 8 hours. Most of the time it's overnight. I like to stain in the afternoon, let that dry overnight. Then we're going to go with the Varathane polyurethane water base. This stuff goes on nice and smooth. It doesn't leave any brush strokes. It's very easy to work with. If you follow this channel any length of time at all, you know that I used to use General Finishes water-based top coat, high performance water-based top coat. That stuff's $30 a quart. This is almost half the price at about $15, $16 a quart, and it works equally as well as far as I can tell. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to put at least 2 coats on, maybe 3. We'll look at it and see. I put 1 coat on the bottom side, and then I'll do 2 coats on the top at least. One thing I forgot to mention yesterday was on the bottom we went ahead and put a support piece across here. It's just glued and brad nailed on. It's just on the bottom of the bottom shelf. The reason for that is my wife said that she may be putting some heavy textbooks on there, so I wanted to make sure it didn't sag in the middle over time. And what I did is I just ripped a 1-inch strip off of a 1x, turned it up on its edge, and then glued and brad nailed that on. That'll just give it a little extra support. Back to the time lapse. So to get the measurements on this dowel or the screw hole here for the back shelf, the back of the shelf, is I just use a combination square. If you don't have one of these, I highly recommend you picking one up. They're very inexpensive and they're one of the most handy tools you can have in the shop. The way it works is this little nut tightens and untightens, and then this will slide back and forward. So what I did was I touched the top of the back shelf and I run it down until it was touching flush here, as well as touching the top of that, and I would just mark here and transfer this mark around, and then that way right there at the end I'd put a mark, and you see where that dot right there is, and there's one there too. That's where I center punched, and I almost drilled the holes here, but I realized that I hadn't moved that forward 3/8 of an inch. So I made the top mark, I made the bottom mark the same way, and transferred that over, and then you have to go 3/8 of an inch forward. If you don't, then you're going to drill flush with the back side of this. And so I wanted to make sure that that was center, so I measured at 3/8 of an inch, drilled those holes, and that's how we got those. So on this build, you notice that we didn't use a lot of pocket holes. I used it on the very bottom just for a little more structure because I like how strong those are. But I didn't use it on the shelves, and the main reason is because standing out here at this distance, I didn't want you to be able to see those pocket holes underneath here. And so, and then if I did that, I'd have to plug them, and it'd been the whole ordeal, and then you would still see them. So I wanted that to be a clean look, which is why I decided to go with the this filling the screw holes with a countersinking and putting a dowel in there. I think that looks better. It gives it a nice little feature on the side. I like how it looks. I like how this turned out, and I'm a fan of the pocket hole. You got to know that. But on this project, I didn't want to use them, so that's why we went with the dowels on the sides. So last summer, if you've been subscribed to the channel, you know that we built this desk for her in her classroom. It's kind of a mess. Don't look at it. School's not started yet. We're just getting the classroom ready. So we built this desk. This is a golden oak stain, 1x6 top. Same spruce 1x on the shelf, same golden oak stain, so everything matches. We also built her another table behind her desk just for extra storage and workspace. And then the top of her rolling podium also has that golden oak stain with those black bases. So within the last 2 summers, we built her a nice classroom set of classroom furniture. As you can see, those casters roll very easy. You can push it, you can pull it, whatever you need to do. It turns on a dime, maybe a big dime. So a cart like this works good in a classroom like this, but also work good in a bedroom if you have a kid that likes to read, or even an adult that likes to read and they just need a place to store their books that's mobile, and you can move this around where you need it. It's not going to be in the way. It's not going to be a permanent fixture, so it's not going to be something that you have to always decorate or work around. So maybe in a nursery. Did I say that already?
No, but you can store board games.
You can store board games, puzzles, books, lots of things you can store on this rolling cart, and it'll be good for a bedroom or an activity room for a kid.
I said, hold on. You're not recording, are you?
Of course I am.
No, you're not.
Yes, I am. See the ticker?
Okay, we'll
See the
cut
red
it
dot?
out.
You're right here. Right there.
But I keep wanting to look there.
I know. So what? Let me take the
Distraction away.
distraction away. How's that?
I'm ADHD. Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary. Rolling library cart for her. We're doing a project for her.
Why don't you start over? I
Everybody
wanna
wants
be
to know
in
for her. She don't want to be in it now, but she's going to be. So. The supplies will be in the comment.
that. There's going to be a link below in the
Link
comments.
below in the comments. No.
No.
There'll be a link in the description below. 20 years ago today, July 31st, 1999, I met my beautiful wife for the very first time. For the bottom shelf only. It's sweet. It's recording, come on.
Okay.
What's the matter?
Nothing.
So where we start at?
You tell me. We're building me a bookshelf for my classroom.
Today is July 31st, 1900 and something. Today is July 31st,